Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Master PR Measurement Vocus webinar. I'm Brianna Stracely, Director of Corporate Communications at Vocus, and your moderator today. During today's webinar with Cami Hoyza, you will learn 5 approaches to social media measurement, how to calculate ROI and other important metrics, how best to utilize the Barcelona principles, and real-life case studies to inform your measurement strategy. Now, before I introduce Cami, I'd like to offer a few brief housekeeping points. First, questions. There will be a moderated Q&A at the end of this webinar. So feel free to use the Questions tab on your webinar panel to submit those early. If you wish to download the slides, you can click the Download Slides PDF link. It's in the box entitled Want to Learn More at the bottom of your audience console. Now, if you're on Twitter, and we hope you are, and you want to tweet about the webinar, please use the hashtag VocusWebinar. That's one word. Or you can use the tweet box located at the top of the webinar console. And also, for the top Vocus webinar tweeters out there using the hashtag, you will receive a Vocus prize pack in the mail, and we'll be revealing those winners on Twitter shortly after today's webinar. Now, without further ado, I'll introduce our speaker. Cami Hoyza is an award-winning communicator and keynote speaker who consistently ranks in top social media and PR influencer lists. Cami founded Zoetica Media and helps high-profile companies and nonprofits with communication and social media strategy and measurement. And with that, I will turn the presentation over to Cami. Welcome. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you so much. Good to be here. The first item up for grabs is this poll. So what we'd like you to do right away is to take this poll. Oh, are we doing the poll yet? Yeah, live. And just click on here what your main PR challenge is. This is for future webinars, I believe. Is that right, Brianna? Oh, she's gone. Yes. So anyway, yeah, so if you could do that for me, that would be great. I'll give you just a second to start. In the meanwhile, I'll just kind of tell you who I am a little bit more. So I am Cami Chat, K-A-M-I-C-H-A-T on Twitter. So please be sure to go ahead and tweet me if you are on Twitter. I will get back to you and follow you and talk with you there. I'm pretty active there. So if you have any questions or thoughts, please go ahead and put them up there. During the chat and during this webinar, we have somebody that's kind of fielding those questions for you. But afterward, I will definitely go back through and answer a lot of your questions and kind of interact with you. So please feel free to do that with me there. So just getting started, as you might know or might not know, this week is PR Measurement Week, or Measurement Week. And so part of what we're doing is trying to be more educational about how to get public relations measurement into what you do. And I very much focus on social media measurement a lot, so that's a lot of what I'm doing here today, but I can also talk about PR measurement. So if you have questions about PR measurement, keep them to the end about traditional PR measurement. I'm more than willing to answer those questions today as well. So the first thing I wanted to say is that measurement is often the thing that we say we need to get in order to prove our worth. And a lot of that gives us, as PR practitioners, anxiety because we're saying, oh my goodness, we're measuring if what we're doing is working. But the real purpose of measurement is really these 3 things. It's kind of like a doctor's office. You measure things so that you know what is working and what isn't. And that will save you a lot of money, time, frustration, because a lot of the things sometimes that we think are working may not be working, and some things that we might not have thought would work at all become huge successes for us. And the only way you're going to find out if that's true is if you're measuring what you're doing. So today I really want to walk you through a framework to measure. I'm going to give you some case studies to kind of understand how that measurement works in real life and in person. And then the last thing I'm going to say is pick what works for you and your business objective and measure that. So I will give you a lot of tactics today, but my goal for you is that you'll find at least one in these tactics that works for you. Don't feel like you have to do them all. So that's just a precursor to what I'm going to say. I do want to give you a little bit of background and kind of understanding about what's going on in measurement right now. There's a number of organizations, and I kind of have their logos across the bottom: PRSA, Council of Public Relations Firms, AMEC, IPR. All of these different organizations have come together to start to build what they're calling social media and PR measurement standards. These standards started with the Barcelona principles, which I think many of you might have heard about, but the Barcelona principles are just the start of what measurement was. Those principles were given in order for us to get to this, which is the measurement standards. And this is really going to be covering traditional media measurement, digital and social media measurement, ROI, which is the big one, right, that everybody wants, communications life cycles, like, how do people walk through different parts of the communications process, funnels, as you call them in marketing, and internal communication, which is coming soon as well. They're going to be working on those standards. So they have actually standards out in all of these different areas. So I very much highly recommend that you Google this, find the link, and I can actually put the link out into the stream later to this direct area, and go and look at what the standards are. One of the things that standards will do for us is define what needs to be measured and how to do it. And the good thing about this is a lot of really great and smart minds are figuring this out, and they're going to put out all of this stuff for free so that you can look at their measurement approaches and just adopt them for what you do. So I think this is going to be a really useful tool for the industry over time, and of course the big thing is getting people to use them. One of the things that I've done, and actually I have this URL here that you can go out and get this right now, but these are the standards, and this also has a pledge. Not a whole lot of companies have pledged yet to follow the standards, but basically what you're saying is, I believe in research-based public relations measurement, and I will stand behind that as a company. So I definitely have done this as a company. We have said that we will follow these standards as they're developed, and as a result, I also am very involved in trying to make sure that they're what I want them to be as well. So you can actually make comments on all of these standards and all of that. So for those of you who are measurement wonks, I would invite you to join me in this. Now, for the great stuff. Okay. So if you're about to measure your programs and you don't really know where to start, the best thing to do is to start with these 3 strategic questions. What problem or challenge do you need to solve? So what are you trying to solve in your business? What is your business objective for your whole company or for a program? Is it a growth or a competitive leadership or perception challenge? I see that a lot of them fall in these areas. Growth, people want to grow their market share. Competitive, you want to do well against your competitors. Leadership, thought leadership, I'm sure you've heard all of these keywords. And perception challenges like, maybe you have some reputation issues or you're worried about reputation. And then of course opportunities that are out there. If you're coming into a new area or kind of going out on, like tech would be a really good example of that. So your communication solution. So what solution are you going to apply to that problem? Now, right now we're just in the communications planning process, but that's going to lead you to your measurement, your measurement approach. And then finally, what can you benchmark what you're going to measure against? I mean, are you going to benchmark yourself against competitors? Are you going to benchmark yourself against the industry that you're in? Are you going to benchmark yourself against yourself, year-over-year growth or year-over-year engagement? We'll talk more about the kinds of things that you can choose for that. So those 3 questions have to be answered right up front. Sitting down with your team, this should only take about 10 or 15 minutes to go through these 3 challenges. And then from there, you can kind of branch out and come up with some challenges. So I went ahead and did this for one thing so you could see how it looks. So for example, let's say you have an event and you want to grow registrations for your event. So what your challenge would be is increasing event registration. We want to increase that. So how are we going to do that? Let's say that we decided we're going to do an outreach to influencers to increase registrations. Maybe we'll give them a special code or whatever. So what the metric or KPI for that would be is registration numbers compared to last year. That's that benchmark, remember? Number of people who registered with the influencer code. So those would be the 2 things we would measure as far as success. That gives you a quick idea about how you approach this. So once you kind of understand all of that, you can look at what kind of KPIs you're going to use for your different programs. And the way to generate KPIs quickly is to kind of look at what kinds of actions you're hoping people will take. So for example, a lot of, and I know there's a lot of different kinds of companies listening on the line today, but let's say you're an agency. A lot of agencies report back to their client. They say, oh, here's all the things we did this month. We tweeted this many times. We wrote this many blog posts. And they call that measurement. That is definitely not measurement, but it is very important to measure or to keep track of that so you can compare it against it. So like you can look, hey, if we increase our outreach by this much, well, our engagement grows by this much. And unless you do that over time, you have a hard time with that. So activity is important to keep track of in order for you to benchmark it against your results. So you need activity to get what I call attention. And attention to me, and we're going to go through all of this in a minute, so I'm not going to get too deep, but attention is very much the shallow stuff like likes, follows, that kind of thing. And then that kind of activity will bring you awareness. And awareness is things like @replies and people talking to you in social media channels and other things like that, including traditional awareness, which includes using surveys, but we'll talk about that just a bit later. And then finally, once people have awareness of you, they're going to hopefully change their attitude and do something different than they did before. And finally, take some kind of action, which in our last example was to register for a conference. But for you, that's going to be something different. So I want each of you right now to, maybe if you have a piece of paper in front of you, to jot down a couple of ideas for things that you would want as an outcome. Do you want people registering? Do you want people buying? Do you want people downloading a white paper? Do you want leads? So just write that down and keep that in mind as we go through this framework. So the first one is activity. So we talked about that being the first step. These are your tweets, your posts, your comments, your connections, your response times. Response time is kind of an interesting one because some companies are very much measuring this, and that can actually lead to some really interesting things on the very end of the action, on the action side. So response times, like how fast are you doing this? KLM does this very well at the airline, and they have a response time, like how soon they're planning on responding to your tweet, right on their Twitter handle. So that might be something that we can maybe tweet out if somebody can grab that and just tweet it out with the Vocus hashtag. So I would say that that's a really interesting way of measuring. Some of what you can do with activity is showing what kind of customer care happens. So I'm just showing you here that very thing. Social Bakers looked at this and they saw that airlines are really doing the best job at responding out there, and automotive is actually kind of low compared to the others, which is surprising to me with all the resources that automotive seems to put into social media. But you can kind of see that this kind of information does exist, and so what's great about this is that you can show the customer care on Facebook and then compare yourself in any of these areas. So if you're doing much better, you can show that to your boss for response times and things. And here is the KLM webpage, so you can see it right here. So they are expecting to reply within 48 minutes. I took the screenshot yesterday or day before, and this number changes all the time. So right now, if you go there, it could say 30 minutes, it could say an hour, but their goal is to respond within an hour. That's their goal. The other thing that you can look at is instead of just looking like, say, YouTube, for example, just looking at views. So a lot of people say, yeah, 3 million people watched this video or so on. Instead of looking at views, you could maybe look at shares. This is a video that went viral for one of my clients, and very interesting to watch this from the back end and kind of work with the measurement on this. They had, at this point when I took the screenshot, 3.6 million views, and they had 107,000 shares. So you can actually see what percentage the shares are of the overall views, and you can get a kind of a sense of how many people have to view your video before they'll share it. That's kind of an interesting stat, even for smaller videos, to kind of to see how that holds up across the entire ecosphere of your YouTube page. You can also do that with Twitter, and everything else. How many people are actually responding to you versus how many people, are supposedly being reached. So I know we use a reach number a lot for Twitter. A lot of tools have it, and usually it's in the millions, but your engagement scores are not in the millions. Pretty much can guarantee that. for big companies like that. So this is just a sample activity report, but it's fairly simple. You set up Excel, you put the stuff across the top, you put the dates down the side, and then you look at your different channels, and you just keep track of what you've done. Now, this to me is real simple. I mean, I think a lot of times we think we need sophisticated tools, and the reason I put this in here is just to say Excel is a really good friend of yours whenever you're doing this kind of work. So the next thing that we would look at is attention. Like, this is all about reach or opportunities to see. That's fans and followers, visits and traffic, potential reach, demographics, vanity metrics, and we'll talk a little bit about vanity, but vanity metrics are things like clout scores and those kinds of things. They're very interesting, I guess, from an individual point of view, but they don't tell you too much about what that account is really doing. So they're by themselves, they're an interesting data point, but they're certainly not one that I use as the final data point. Here's an example of some attention metrics. You can look at the tweets, the number of tweets. So this is actually an event that I've done over a couple of years, and it just shows the different reach things. One of the things we like to do is see how many people are participating and how many people are tweeting, and with that, what is the reach per person, and what is the reach per annual. So if you look at the tweets, like say you have 720 tweets, you have 116 people tweeting, the reach is 644,000, but the reach per person is 5,000. So you can look down at 2014 and you can see we had a dip in 2013. So we can kind of say, what happened there? What did we do differently? And we did. We looked at that. Our reach was much higher, but our reach per person was lower, and overall was kind of about the same. In 2014, which was this year, we had more, like in 2013 we had a ton of people tweeting. This year we kind of were back down to a regular number, and our reach was the same as if 754 people were tweeting. So our overall reach per person went way up. That means more influencers were involved in this event. So you can kind of use these numbers to kind of get an idea about what's happening here and how it's working. I feel like this year we kind of really got steady, and I like the fact that people that had higher reach per person were tweeting and being involved in the event. That was seen as a success. So awareness, it's all about engagement with you. So now we move away from just attention, which is all those follows and likes and all the things that we all do and which we wish we had more information. So how do we get beyond that? One of the ways that we can do that is looking at some different kinds of KPIs. Awareness KPIs are things like a conversation rate, an amplification rate, applause rate, and I'll tell you what all these are in a minute. Referrals, percent of people that are engaged with us, return visits to a website, those kinds of things are showing awareness, especially in digital and social media. So here's some engagement metrics, and this is directly out of a tool called True Social Analytics. And I highly recommend that anybody get an account with them. You can get a free account for 30 days and kind of take a look at it. And I think if you're just one person and one account, you can actually get this for free on an ongoing basis. But even if you don't get it for free, it's super cheap. And what I love about this is it actually gives you very quickly your engagement metrics for every channel that you have. Here I was looking at Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, but True Social Analytics can actually do quite a bit more than those. This was just for this particular client that I'm showing you here. So it'll show you a conversation rate, which is basically how many comments per post that you put out. So if you're somebody who puts out a ton of posts, but your conversation rate, meaning how many people come back to you and say, at CamiChat, what a great idea, or what do you think about this, or these kinds of things. And I'm sorry, it's True Social Metrics. I made a mistake on that. True Social Metrics. And what you want to do is look at that. So a good amplification rate, they're getting a great amplification rate, say on Twitter, for example, in this case. They're getting a 3.19, but their overall conversation rate, so they're getting a lot more shares than they're getting comments. So you can look at that and say, do we want more shares? I mean, is this good? Is this bad? You have to think about what is important to your company. Certainly a 1-to-1 ratio is probably what you're really looking for. So this 0.37 would concern me. I'd be like, okay, let's see how we can up that conversation rate. We need to talk to people more rather than just blast out messages. Our applause rate, which is our favorites per post, is pretty high. So we must be putting stuff out that's interesting, but it's not conversational. So you would want to mix that up a little bit. And you can kind of look at that across all these different areas, across Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, to get an idea of where you're at. The economic value on the bottom is something that you can connect with Google Analytics. I don't have that connected here, but if you knew that if 200 people came to your website, 10% of those people would buy something, you could actually put an economic value on the number of people that are engaging with you. I'd be super careful about doing that, because unless you actually have a number, then you're just selling vaporware, which I'm really kind of suspect of, which is why mine says 0. Hunt Alternatives Op-Ed. So this is a really interesting case study that was one of our clients. And what happened was we have a client, her name is Swanee Hunt, and she's up in Boston. And she did a couple of op-eds for the Boston Globe. And they put them up on the website and also in the print edition. And when we went to the website, I mean, the truth is there wasn't a whole lot of conversation around these op-eds. I mean, there was no comments. There was or very few, and we weren't really sure if people were really talking about them. So we went to a little free service that we like that you can kind of, there's other ways you can do this, but this is free. It's called muckrack.com, muckrack.com, who shared my link. And we just dropped them in there. And what was really great about this is we could see right away how many people had shared it on Twitter, how many people had shared this link on Facebook, and also in LinkedIn. They were actually shocked that anybody shared it on LinkedIn. I wanted to show you this because they're not huge numbers. This is a small nonprofit, and I just wanted you to see how kind of it worked out for them. She was really excited about this because her nonprofit really revolves around advocacy. One of these was about how women need to be elected, and that was one of her nonprofits that she supports. And then the other one was about this idea of targeting Johns in sex trafficking, so targeting people that are, you know, buying sex from prostitutes, for example. They're trying to get them to not do that. And part of the reason they're doing that is to say, listen, a lot of these girls are being sex trafficked. They are not there. They're not like people that are just saying, hey, I want to do this for a profession. And so they are working with local law enforcement and other things. So this op-ed having this much pickup, especially in Facebook and other places, was interesting to her. More interesting, I think, would have been figuring out exactly what they were saying, which would have taken a more sophisticated tool that they couldn't afford at that time. So that brings us to attitudes and advocacy. That would be our third point, attitudes and advocacy. And this is where people, you know, change their attitudes about you and they advocate for you. What is the sentiment of the conversation out there? So you could have a lot of people talking about you, but if it's all negative, that's not so great. What's your share of voice with your competitors? How many people are talking about your product versus another product, or your industry versus another industry? Purchase intent. This is kind of one that's kind of being used a lot these days, is asking people, you know, after, you know, engaging with this content, are you more likely to purchase or not? Very interesting stuff going on with that I'll show you in a minute. Customer satisfaction is another one that we look at, you know, how many people are satisfied, and you can also see at how they're satisfied by channel. So if you have a customer satisfaction survey at the end of your customer process, you can also ask them how they heard about you, and you can also ask them if they are, like, say, your Facebook fan, or if they have connected with you over social media in the last, you know, 30 to 60 days or whatever. And then you can cross-tab that against their satisfaction scores and see if that helps satisfaction. Does it hurt satisfaction? Is it neutral? So it's kind of interesting to see if satisfaction is guided at all by their social media interaction with you. And then, of course, Net Promoter Score, which a lot of companies use, and that really is the bottom line. Will people recommend you to their friends? So let me show you a few of those. This right here is a really interesting study around smartphones, and I laughed because it was from last year, and BlackBerry is kind of still in there, but it's really hurting. My husband actually has a BlackBerry still, and my son called it the dinosaur phone last night, and they're forcing him at the end of the year to like upgrade in his company to an iPhone, which I found really interesting, that BlackBerry is being completely expunged out of corporate America. So this has probably changed a little bit, but what I found interesting about this is they asked the question about smartphones. They wanted to know, how many people were using them in different forums. So I thought this was a really interesting. So in blogs, a lot of them were talking about smartphones. 21% were talking about Apple. 18 were talking about Android. So you can kind of see how those numbers kind of go up and down in different kinds of social media channels. You could also do that with your topic. You can take a look at keywords and look in different blogging areas, like so how many people are talking about you versus your competitors in a blog. So this is a share of voice, just to give you an idea of what that looks like. This I found really interesting too, the British Academy Film Awards. They did an online search of these different movies before they were nominated. So the blue part was pre-nomination chatter versus post-nomination chatter in the pink. So you can see how the chatter changed. And to be honest with you, 12 Years a Slave won, which was interesting. So all of the chatter did point toward who was the ultimate winner. That was interesting to me too. All right. So purchase intent, I told you I'd show you this. We had an opportunity to do a purchase intent study just this last couple of weeks, and in fact we're in the middle of it right now over the some NFL stuff. And we asked, how likely are you to purchase a product or service that you like on Facebook? And then we also asked similar questions for other actions like commenting, sharing, and other things for Twitter, LinkedIn, and Pinterest. So what we came up with and what we saw was overall, people were more likely to talk about something if they were interacting with it, but really it was right around the 36% range. So it's not like they were over 50% of the people that interact with you on Facebook now suddenly say that they would like or purchase your product. But what I found very interesting is that Instagram is much higher than the other ones on purchase intent, which kind of surprised us. So 51 to 52%. Facebook did not surprise me because that's a much broader swath of the public. So I can imagine that, 36% of people on Facebook that are interacting with the product are more likely to buy. So you're going to have those super buyers in there. Twitter and LinkedIn were similar in purchase intent, but Instagram was slightly higher, which we thought was interesting. So you can do things like that, do surveys and ask people and polls, but you just have to ask the right questions. Actions. So here's where the rubber meets the road and probably why you're on this webinar today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the actions that people take and how we can measure how that's working. So action KPIs are really this ROI, return on investment, things like customer lifetime value, how valuable is a customer to you over the lifetime of their, and especially for B2B, this is really important. Process savings. How much do you save by using one method or another of communication? And emerging innovations. I mean, a lot of what people see in business as important is coming up with the next great thing. And if part of what your communications does is, put you in touch with people that are going to spark that inside of you, that's really interesting, I think, to some people. So I know Dell does that. I don't have a slide for them today, but they do that a lot with, what kind of products are they going to, or innovations are they going to put into their product based on what people are asking for. They have an online way of kind of doing that. So let's be really clear about ROI. ROI is the gain from an investment that you make minus the cost of investment divided by the cost of investment. I would say that, a lot of people like to make ROI into a lot of other things, but it really is how much did you spend and how much did you make and what was the net of that. So the path to ROI is similar. I mean, especially in digital, is really interesting. The biggest problem is that you need to set up a funnel to conversion, and a lot of people never do that. So you can do that on the back end of your Google Analytics or your analytics program by setting up these funnels. And what happens is when they come to a web page or a landing page, you want them to do something, whether it's download something, put their email address in, buy something, initiate a conversation, download a trial, whatever it is that you're doing, this is what you want them to do. Or, in the case of like a local, an on-the-street retailer, you might want them to bring in a coupon that they downloaded from your website. So all of these things in digital would be coming through the website mostly. So you want to funnel people to a call to action. And eventually, I love Facebook, I love Twitter, I use them every day. But, one of the things you really want to do is you want people to come to your home site so that they can see who you really are and start to interact with you in a way that will eventually lead to a conversion. So funnel is really important. Tag your links. That's one of the easiest ways that you can do this, is to tag all of your links that you put out that have calls to action in them. Use the free URL builder that Google has. All you have to do is say Google URL builder, and it will come up for you in search. And you can go there, you put your link in, and it gives you a long link. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen that. There's a URL, and then there's a question mark after it, and then all these things. Well, you want a link like that, and then you can take that link and shorten it in Bitly or in Hootsuite or whatever program you use to shorten your links, and then you can track on the back end where in Google Analytics, you can track how many people came to your site through that link. And then if you have a funnel set up, you can easily see what those people did when they got to your site. So funnels are really important, and they're really easy to build. And guess what? Google has like a tutorial on YouTube for how to do it. I mean, it's simple. It's dead simple, but you do have to watch these things and invest a little bit in your own education to figure that out. Probably some of you on the call are amazing funnel setter-uppers. I know that's a horrible way to say that, but you can set up funnels. And so if you are one of those people, put it in the stream. Let us all know. We'll call you. And then ask people where they heard about you. This is like, marketing 101. I mean, if people call you on the phone and say, hey, I'm interested in your product or whatever, ask them where they heard about you. Was it word of mouth from friends? Was it online? Was it through a social channel? So use like old-fashioned means. I mean, that's really important. And then compare real life to digital measurements and report the revenue by type of acquisition. So you want to really look at what's happening in real life and make sure that it matches up to what you're seeing, like, say, in your digital. So, if all of a sudden you see all these purchases or, all these people, all these leads online, but you're in your real life reporting, like from your phones, you're not seeing that. Now, if it's just you, probably not going to happen. But like, say you're a company and you have a phone sales team and they're just not recording everything, then you can kind of see that. You're like, wow, we got a lot of leads last month, and it seems like you guys are saying we didn't for social. And then they can kind of work together as a team to fix that. So use your resources in real life too, not just digital. This is an example of that. So I had this Methodist hospital, which is here in Houston. They came out and spoke at the Social Media Breakfast, which is something I run in Houston, about 2 months ago. And he told this really interesting story about these different blog posts. So they are doing all the things I just told you, all those things in the funnel. They're doing all that stuff. And they're actually being able to see from blog posts how many people sign up to come see a doctor or make an appointment, or all of that stuff is being tracked at this point for this hospital. And he had 2 different articles, the story of 2 articles. One was this one about weight loss. Weight loss is a challenging journey. And as you can see, they didn't get a ton of shares on it. I think it was like 6 at the time. There may be more now. It was just very, very few. And then he did this other one, very similar time frame, like maybe in that same week. And the other one was all about how to improve your sleep. So I'm going to show you that real quick. So 3 science-backed ways to improve your sleep. And as you can see, in that same week, they got 21 shares on that one versus 6 shares on this other one, which seemed sort of like, nobody was talking about it. Plus, they had some comments on the science-backed ways to improve your sleep. So in all the other measures of attention, the science-backed ways to improve your sleep seemed like a really, really good story, right? Well, guess what? It wasn't. Not one person clicked through the link on that story to go to the main website and join a sleep study or learn more about sleep doctors or get help. Whereas on this weight loss journey, they got 3 new people to join the weight loss clinic with no comments, no nothing. So a lot of the things that we see as really, really popular ways of measuring something sometimes aren't really what drives the ROI in the end. So that's why I say you have to measure beyond likes and shares and those kinds of things, because those don't necessarily lead to what I would call sales, or in this case, patients. Another way to do this is to look at your channel revenue. So on the back end of Google Analytics, you can also see where different traffic came from. So did it come from Facebook, a blog, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever. And you can look at how many visits came in. And if you have a funnel set up, you can look at the actions that people took. So it could be money in this year-to-date revenue, could be year-to-date actions, or it could be year-to-date revenue. In this case, for this client, this is revenue. So they know when somebody comes in to their website, they have an e-commerce kind of website, so they can see how much they paid or spent. So for all of these visits, I was able to boil this all the way down to how much a visit is worth to us. A lot of people say, how much is a Facebook like worth? Well, nothing. What's worth something is somebody visiting your site from Facebook, because they're going to do something when they get there. So you could say, instead of money per visit, you could say, hey, our people that come to our website through Facebook take a lot more actions. They download more white papers. They sign up for more webinars than people that don't. The next thing is attribution. So attribution is sort of the big thing now. And this is actually from Adobe, their back-end thing. But anyway, so what you're going to want to look at is attribution comparison. So let's just say you go online. You're going to go online and you're going to look something up. You're going to research it. So you're going to type in a keyword and say, hey, I'm looking for a toaster oven. And then you're going to look at the toaster ovens that pop up, and you're going to look for toaster oven reviews, and maybe you'll go and find a toaster oven that you kind of like. And then you'll visit their Facebook page maybe, because you Google their name and their Facebook page comes up kind of high. And you go in and look at their Facebook page and you kind of interact there. Maybe you even like it. And then eventually you kind of wander around and you get back to their page and you buy the toaster oven. Well, what's going to happen is that website is going to say, hey, that person directly entered our URL and they were a direct buy. But the truth is that you saw maybe a Google AdWords, you did your own search, you were on social media. So attribution will take the credit for that sale and spread it out over all those touch points so that all those different things get credit for that sale. There is a back-end way to do this. It's very expensive on Google Analytics both and also on Omniture. But what I can say is that there are some low-cost ways of doing this, and I'm going to promise you something again, because I do have a really good resource for that. There's a really great just do-it-yourselfer who had figured out how to put together an Excel spreadsheet, and you just take your Google Analytics data and you dump it into this spreadsheet, and then it kind of helps you do this attribution. So I will put that in there. I'm writing down the things I'm going to do for you later. So there you go. So this is an idea. So what happens is when you do that, if you do first click attribution, which is saying, okay, that's the first click, and last click attribution, meaning the last place that people came from, there's an 88% difference between those two. So all these places, there's something in between here, the places people are going that isn't being accounted for. So that's the cutting edge, the bleeding edge. Let me kind of go off the bleeding edge a little bit and show you something a little bit more earthy. This is Anas Yunus. He's from MD Anderson. He is a lymphoma specialist. He had a problem. He had too few people who were signing up for clinical trials for his lymphoma trials. And he needed to build a reputation and add more clinical trial people to his base. So he did that. He put up a Facebook page. He started blogging on CancerWise, which is the blog for MD Anderson, and he just started talking about his research. And as he went along, he ended up getting some, good discussions going with people that really cared about this. And what ended up happening at the end of the year is he doubled his clinical trial base, which was huge for him. I mean, this is exactly how his metric for the hospital is his clinical trial base. And, he didn't have a ton of followers. I think it was like 1,500 people on his Facebook page, and his community on Twitter I think was maybe 600 at that time, maybe 900. So it's not like it was a ton of people. It might even be something you would consider not a success for what you do if you're a big company. But guess what? He had the right people following him, and because he had the right people following him, he got the metric he wanted, and he was very focused on what he was trying to do. He wasn't trying to be like popular on Twitter or popular on Facebook. He was trying to build a community of people who cared about lymphoma, and often these were people that had parents with lymphoma or kids with lymphoma or so on. And so this really was a huge deal, and people were able to get hope from that. So the other thing that I will look at, and I will get to your questions in just a minute too, by the way, so start queuing them up, and they will get them ready for me as soon as we stop here. But you can look at talent acquisition on LinkedIn. This CH2M Hill, which is a construction company worldwide, was having trouble hiring people in foreign countries. They were having to send expats, and it cost a lot of money, and they were having a hard time sourcing those. And what ended up happening was they went ahead and put some stuff up on LinkedIn and really, really hit LinkedIn hard, and they were able to start getting more qualified resumes and hiring people in country and saving just thousands of dollars. That's another example. Oh yeah, here's his Anis's results. So you can look at that later, but I already told you. You can look at comparing costs, like how much does it cost to reach somebody on television versus social media versus email newsletters. This is an actual case study that I've done that shows the ROI even. So we were able to show $2.6 million in revenue from all of the work we've done in social media, because at the time that we opened this roller coaster, we asked the people when they were coming off, why did you come? Where did you hear about us? So we did an in-person survey along with social media blitzing, and we also opened the ride about a month early, so we were able to have a month of just showing what the social media impact was. Cost per lead, that's another way to look at ROI. So you can say, how much did it cost for us to get this lead? A lot of marketing departments pay a lot of money to get leads through advertising revenues. What about these like webinars like Vocus does? How many people from this webinar will try out Vocus? Well, they should be counting that, and I'm sure they are. So what is the cost per lead for that? How much are they saving the company by having these webinars? In this case, HP was saving the company $4,000 per webinar because they were able to get 100 leads in every single webinar. Or you can calculate your customer value. How much does a customer usually spend over their lifetime? So if you can attribute a customer coming in through social media or through email marketing or any kind of channel, you can show, hey, we are responsible for bringing in that much revenue to the company over time because we brought them in that way. This just shows how that can kind of work. There's a lot of listening tools out there that will help you do this, and I should have put Vocus on here, I'm sorry, but Vocus should be in here too. But BrandWatch, Systemos, Custom Scoop, Social Mention, I mean, there's a lot of them out there, so you want to look for a listening tool you can use and some engagement tools. I gave you a little bit of information about True Social Metrics, which is the one down in the left-hand corner here. These are all tools on this page that I've used and really recommend for different networks. You can look at them later. I have a link to get to them. And then, of course, there's Vanity and influence tools. We talked about that before. Right now, I really like Telligence and eCarn. These both are looking at how people actually spread messages. I really love them as a leading-edge, cutting-edge tool. The rest of these are all, more like how do you find an influencer, and those are all based on likes and those kinds of things. And then analysis tools. This is that do-it-yourself thing I told you about. It's called Lunametrics. You can just Google this, do-it-yourself multi-channel attribution spreadsheet. You'll find it. Power Pivot is an excellent little add-in for Excel, which will allow you to work with data very quickly without having to be really super smart about how to do pivot tables. And Tableau is another really amazing tool that I found most recently that you can feed information into on a monthly basis. So I just left those there. I'm not going to go through all of those for you, but I gave you all these links, and I know that you can download this from the Vocus portal. So I'm just going to open it to questions now, see what you guys have to say. Let's talk.
Thank you, Cami. That was such a great presentation. So right before we pop into questions, we're going to launch a survey that we have. You'll see it on your screen momentarily. Your feedback is very valuable to us. We use that to determine our topics for future webinars and also how we can improve them. So we would love it if you could take the time to fill that out while you're listening to the Q&A. So with that, I'll jump into our first few questions here, Cami. Let's start with, what's the biggest challenge that people have for measuring today?
Well, I would say there's several challenges, and the first one is focus. I think maybe more than anything, that's the biggest one, is like, I think we can get really overwhelmed by all the things that we can measure, and you just get so overwhelmed you don't even start. So focus and starting. So you just have to get started. Decide what matters to your business and measure that. Don't try to measure everything. Measure what matters, and that will get you going. So the way to do that, again, is to go back and say, hey, what is my business objective? And then try to find the measures that will show at least partly what that business objective is.
One of the things I thought was really interesting that you hit on was to focus on engagement metrics over reach or vanity metrics. Mm-hmm. So should brands create and track an overall engagement score by social network, or maybe even just overall for social, that they can use as a health check, to see how they're doing on social? And if so, what data would you use to create that?
So engagement scores, I think, are interesting. I'm a little bit hesitant about a single score, which is why I kind of like what True Social Metrics is doing. They have kind of three-part score, and I might be able to pull that up while we're talking about it. But that three-part score, I think, is really interesting because it's looking at how many shares, how many engagements, like replies and those kinds of things, which they call conversation rate. And then there's a third one, which is how many people save your stuff. How many people put the little star on it so that they can read it later or find it later. So I think that those three are very interesting for different reasons. But I guess you could combine the three. But my problem with that is that people have do these behaviors for different reasons, right? Some people will want to talk with you because they're trying to, maybe they're more in the mood to buy something, or maybe they're more in the mood to do something more with you. Here it is. So, your comments per post, your shares per post, and your favorites per post. It doesn't have to be through this tool. It can be through any tool. But looking at that overall, how many comments do you get per post that you put out is a nice way to make goals for your channels. Like, I'd like to be at 1 for Twitter, instead of 0.37. How do we get there? Okay, then you put in the tactics. Okay, now we need to be a lot more conversational, because right now it seems we're just putting out a lot of infographics and pictures, and people like them and all, but there's nothing to say about them, right?
So we've had a lot of people really interested in the different metrics you talked about today. So I'm going to run through a few specific questions on that.
Sure.
First is, what do you recommend for measuring attitudes? So specifically, sentiment, but also share of voice on traditional media in addition to social.
Yeah, so sentiment and share of voice are important, and also in regular media, you may also want to look at messages. Like, when they write about you, are they writing about the things that you hope that they would write about? You know what I'm saying? It's one thing for people to write about you. I always loved it whenever we had when we did the advertising value stuff back in the olden days. By the way, don't do that anymore if you're doing advertising value. It's been debunked. But the problem with that is that, of course, that oftentimes they take even a negative article and say it was worth something. Just maybe you should have, taken that off. So sentiment, share of voice, messages. I mean, there's tools to do that. You can, Vocus is good. As you guys do that, right? So there are tools out there that do this. It can be a very expensive proposition to do these share of voice kinds of things. So unless you really, you have a budget for a tool like that, if you don't have a budget for a tool like that, there's some freebie ways to do it, or there's some lesser tools that you can use to kind of go around and do different searches. I can share those with you offline, but I would say that share of voice is interesting only insofar as if that's a big metric of yours. Does it matter to you that you're being talked about more than your competitors? Does that mean, how does that match up to your sales? It may or may not. So I don't know. I don't know if that answers the question really, but there it is.
So what about press releases? We've had a lot of questions come in on what's the best way to measure how effective a press release and what the return is you get on it. Yeah.
Okay, so we have some challenges with press releases, especially in the digital realm these days, right? For a very long time, there's been a big group of people using them for SEO purposes, which right now is no longer really a good idea because of duplicate content and some stuff with Google. A lot of these services have been hit pretty hard. So what I would recommend is actually seeing what kind of results you can get from your press release. So again, tag your links in your press release. So if you put up a press release, make sure the links in it are tagged so you know how many people clicked through that press release. I know that Southwest Airlines has used this to great effect. They know when they put out a press release how many people click through that and even book a flight. And they were able to track a lot of that. And that was that's as far back as 5 years ago. So that's old school kind of tag those links, people. It takes some time. It's a little bit annoying, but just do it. Also, how many articles are picked up from your press release? That'd be still a very good metric.
So what about the people out there that have a really small PR communications team, so a one-person shop or 2 people? How would you recommend they go about prioritizing and tackling measurement to get it done as well as their normal day-to-day work?
Yeah, I totally feel for you because I'm kind of like that. And I hope I put enough examples in here that were of smaller kind of, I did small and big here so that I covered all the bases. But here's what I'm going to say. The best thing you can do is to focus. Don't try to measure everything. Focus on what matters to your business. And I can't tell you what that is because I'm not talking to you directly. But if I were talking to you directly, I would say, what is it that keeps your boss up at night? What do they need to do? What do they need to show? And then you would tell me, and then I would say, well, how can you help to prove that for them through your measurement process? And that may be hard, but it takes a little bit of time to sit down and just talk through it. And then if you find out, hey, the best thing the most important thing we need is leads. We need leads. That's what we need. Then maybe all of your measurement and everything is based on things like downloads of white papers or downloads of whatever, because you can, your team is going to say, hey, out of every 100 downloads of white papers, we get about 5 or 6 people that are willing to talk to us about the product. And that's the same thing with nonprofits, by the way, and other small teams. You're going to have to look at what really matters to what you do, and it could even be not money, but like my client Swanee Hunt. She wanted people to talk about the issues. So chatter online might become a really important metric for you in that case. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, that was great. So more questions. People are really enjoying this. What is a good time frame? And I'm sure this is on a case-by-case basis, but if you could provide some best practices. When people are going to put together a report on a campaign they did, the example given in this question was a golf tournament in June, and their boss is looking for a report on how the marketing went for it. What's a good duration before you start to calculate that ROI of your efforts?
Okay, well, first thing you need to do is make sure you have a really strong objective for your event. So what is it that you want to get out of this event? So if it's a golf tournament in June, sounds like fundraising, doesn't it? I don't know. Anyway, so let's say that's fundraising, and you need to raise a certain amount of money for this golf tournament. So what you would do is say, okay, by this date, I need to raise this much. So you would start measuring right away. I mean, you're going to want to know, like, you're going to want to have touch points. So 3 months before an event, you're going to want to have your objectives set. Then you're going to want to measure, like, as you go. If you also want to look at what happened last year. If you've done this golf tournament before, what did they get last year and by when? And then kind of measure them. And usually while you're in a campaign, honestly, I look at the numbers about weekly, depending on how long the campaign is, you know. So like weekly leading up to it, and then of course the week of the event. And then you may have some residual kind of stuff coming off of it as much as, you know, 3 or 4 months later. So you just want to make sure you keep touching it once a month after the event.
We've had several questions come in talking about measuring traditional media and how do you track, you know, public perception of your company, not sales, but, you know, perception.
Yeah. So perception is a little bit tougher. Sentiment is one way to do it, although if you do sentiment online especially, you're going to have to have a reality check on it, like have somebody look at it, because almost every tool will give you sentiment. But if you click through it, most computer-generated sentiment tools are like pretty bad at figuring out what real humans would say. So, you know, they may have a lot of negative stuff that is actually positive, or a lot of positive stuff that's actually negative. So you need to look into that and at least spot check it manually a little bit. You can also hire a firm to do that a lot more, especially if you're a big company. You might want to hire a firm that would look at each one, and you would have people with score sheets and stuff, and it's a lot more expensive, and it's a lot more detailed. So there's a lot of things you can do with that. Katie Payne does a service like that I think is really interesting. So people like that would be good resources for you. So as far as reputation and sentiment, though, over time, there are reputation scores. I know that Shandwick Weber does a survey every year for corporate reputation, so that could be an interesting that could be a really interesting thing for you to look at as their annual report and kind of see the questions that they ask. But a lot of this is going to have to be done with surveying and polls. I mean, these are like traditional media measurement bastions. So you would want to have some surveys, you know, before you did the campaign, then during the campaign, and then after the campaign to see how things shifted over time. So, I mean, it's pretty straight up. And you need to make sure that you have really good questions that you ask. Certainly the Institute for Public Relations has some really amazing resources on its website that you can go look at for traditional media measurement and the kinds of questions that you should ask for those kinds of inquiries.
I have a pretty specific question for you next, but I think it's one that all PR practitioners have thought about. How do you best measure impressions when you have coverage in an online outlet? I mean, you know, you can obviously tell their traffic for a month, but do you divide that to get your hit value?
Your hit value. Do you have an idea? Could you say that again in the way that I'm trying to understand exactly what they're?
So if you get coverage in the Washington Post, well, you can easily find out that their online website visits is, you know, 5 million a month or whatever it is. But you don't know how many people saw your article. So, you know, how do you calculate value of online coverage?
You can't. And honestly, that's just trying to do advertising value equivalencies again, which I refuse to do. So I wouldn't do that. Instead, I think what I would do is do what I did, find out how it spread through social media. That's really interesting, I think, like how many people are talking about it in different social media channels. That's interesting. You can get a reach number off of social media channels for sure. You can look at, you can look at their 5 million per month, but again, that reach is like clearly not everybody's going to read that one article. You can use, interestingly, Moz has a really great tool that you can use in their arsenal, that you can actually look at all of the different, like a particular URL, and see how well it's doing in social media and in digital. But you aren't going to be able to know exactly how many people visited that page because you do not have the back-end analytics for that paper. QuantCast does do some of that, but not by page, but by outlet.
All right, that was great. So I think that's going to be the last question. We're at the top of the hour. So thank you all for attending. You can find an archive of webinars on our website at vocus.com. Additionally, there's some really excellent research and slides from webinars past on our SlideShare. That's slideshare.com/vocus. And of course, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter. So we are Vocus, a leading provider of cloud-based public relations software and parent company to online services PR Web, Help a Reporter Out, iContact. And if you followed the news on Monday, we are now parent company to Visible Technologies. So Cami, thank you again for joining us. This was a great webinar. We've had some great feedback on Twitter, so we really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening in, and keep asking questions on Twitter. I'll try to get to them as I can, okay?
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Take care.